The story begins with a group of adventurers facing a giant, furious, fire-breathing dragon. One of them is Biza, an A-rank shaman from the Golden Hour guild ready to support his team. Another member is Rotich, an A-rank mage who also belongs to Golden Hour and won't stop casting fire spells. Kunen, an S-rank swordsman, orders Saki to find an opening and deal the final blow to the monster. At the same time, someone shouts for our protagonist, Yuki, to stay hidden in the rear so he doesn't get hurt. Then we see the young man, who is just an F rank with no class or guild, working as a simple porter. The boy just agrees with the order and says yes while watching the battle from a safe place. Meanwhile, the group's mages continue to cast their powerful spells against the large creature. With the dragon distracted by the attacks, Kunen yells for Saki to strike with all her strength now. The swordswoman then leaps into the air, preparing to deliver a powerful blow against her adversary. With a focused and determined look, she prepares to activate one of her abilities. She then uses her luminous slash technique, creating several cuts of light that go straight for the monster. Hit head on, the great creature lets out a roar of pain, feeling the power of the girl's attack. With that, the beast falls defeated and Yuki watches, impressed by the power of the S-rank group. The protagonist is amazed, thinking about how they managed to defeat a dragon so easily. It's explained that decades have passed since dungeons appeared, and adventurers have been fighting monsters. As a result, many abandoned or unknown dungeons end up getting out of control and becoming a problem. Furthermore, many adventurers hunt only for money and don't bother to truly clear the dungeons. That's why only a small group of heroes understands the danger and leads expeditions to complete the missions. Suddenly, someone grabs the protagonist's shoulder from behind, leaving the boy completely surprised. It was the shaman who grabbed him, and now he's shouting, demanding a recovery potion. Startled, our hero apologizes and quickly searches for the item in his large backpack. With a mocking smile, Rotich says that unlike the boy, he is risking his life out there. Biza then complains that he can't believe a weakling like Yuki came, even if he is an acquaintance of Saki's. He continues, saying the young man is the worst kind of newbie, slow and with almost no mana, which makes the boy sad. At that, the leader, Kunan, tells the two to stop talking because that dungeon is estimated to be S rank. With a serious look, he states that this is no place for them to be making jokes. The two then apologize, and the leader turns to give an order to our protagonist, Yuki. He says that if the boy is also a member of the group, he must immediately do what he was told. The young porter just nods and responds with a yes, wearing a nervous expression. After the lecture, the group of adventurers continues to advance through the dangerous dungeon. Yuki then reflects that a moment ago, he didn't have the mindset of a true adventurer. The boy blames himself for getting too excited seeing the heroes power up close and getting distracted. He thinks this was a great learning experience, but there's still a problem. The protagonist recognizes that their power levels are too far apart, as he doesn't even have a class. Even so, he promises that one day he will become an adventurer like them, but Saki calls out to him. The girl warns him, saying that getting distracted during an adventure is forbidden and asks him to be careful. She adds that she doesn't want to lose anyone else from her family, and the boy says he understands. Yuki then remembers a bad feeling that he never wants to feel again. With that, a memory from 2 years ago comes to the boy's mind about the collapse of a district. The tragedy was caused by a dungeon outbreak, and the news said survival was unlikely. In a hospital room, young Yuki and Saki were watching the news about the disaster on television. It's revealed that the two grew up together in an orphanage and had many happy memories there. They dreamed of being adventurers, and that's why they left the orphanage to pursue their dreams. But the place they called home, where they could always return, was taken from them. Not just their home, but also all the dear people who lived in the orphanage with them. A dungeon disaster destroyed everything in a terrible fire, taking away everything they loved. Back in the present, the protagonist affirms with determination that he will prevent tragedies no matter what. At that moment, a small one-eyed monster stealthily appears behind Yuki without anyone noticing. A mysterious figure then says he has found him and that the boy is the final bait for his plan. Suddenly, something attacks the protagonist from behind and the boy turns around, startled by the strange feeling. He then wonders what that was and sees this small creature fallen on the ground near his feet. Seconds later, the creature is hit by a dark energy and explodes into several pieces. The explosion activates a huge red magic circle on the ground, trapping the entire group of adventurers. The leader, Kunan, realizes it's a teleportation trap and shouts for everyone to brace for impact. Meanwhile, the mysterious voice tells them to welcome that human with a wicked smile. With a flash of red light and a lot of smoke, the entire group is teleported to another place. Upon arriving, they look around confused, wondering where on earth they are and if it's the boss room. Kunan then orders everyone to form a circle and stay alert, and he asks Yuki to prepare the return item. With her sword in hand, Saki senses a presence approaching and says something is coming their way. A puddle of a red liquid begins to bubble on the ground right in front of the whole group. The leader, Kunan, clicks his tongue in frustration as he senses the imminent danger. Suddenly, a foot wearing an elegant shoe steps into the red puddle without a care. The figure of a white-haired man appears, and someone calls him the Demon King. Our protagonist, Yuki, is completely shocked and breaks into a cold sweat at the enemy's appearance. It's explained that this is the sinister title given only to the bosses of S-class dungeons. Without wasting time, Saki charges forward with her sword to attack the powerful adversary without fear. At the same time, Kunan prepares one of his ice abilities to support the swordswoman. He then launches a powerful triple ice dart that flies straight toward the enemy. Saki also leaps into the air to attack the Demon King from above as the darts close in. The girl then uses her luminous slash ability once more with all her strength. But the monster complains that young people today have no manners and easily stops the attacks. The ice lances shatter into pieces before even touching the adversary's body. At that moment, other monsters appear beside the Demon King, who says the heroes are ignorant. Suddenly, Kunan is thrown far away by a surprise attack and cries out in pain. An elf with green magic circles appears and says, "Oh my," with a smile on her face. She then comments that an extra intruder came along with them, referring to our hero. Elsewhere, a beastman attacks Biza with a powerful and swift kick. The shaman tries to defend himself from the blow with his arms, but the enemy's strength is too great. Rotish is also attacked by a giant monster and can't react in time to the blow. The mage is shocked as a monster in a top hat whispers that they are not there to play around. A red magic circle glows intensely on the ground, showing the seriousness of the situation. A red-haired woman then warns everyone that the fearsome Demon King is coming. The leader, Kunan, becomes tense and says that if they continue like this, they will all be eliminated with no chance to escape. From behind, our hero observes the scene and wonders if he can create an opening for his friends. The word "eliminate" echoes in Yuki's mind, and the boy falls to the ground, utterly terrified. But he refuses to give up and vows to himself that he won't let the tragedy repeat itself. With that, he thinks about what an adventurer would do and quickly looks for something in his backpack. With a determined look, he grabs the return item and understands what needs to be done now. The protagonist then lights the lighter, which is actually the activator for the escape spell. Suddenly, golden magical gears appear in the air, ready to initiate the teleportation. A message announces that the return sequence has been activated, leaving all his companions surprised. Next, a 5-second countdown begins for the escape to be completed. Yuki then turns to one of the monsters and calls him out for a direct confrontation with a smile. The Demon King's minion is surprised by a sword that pierces him from top to bottom. Our hero is the one holding the weapon and tells the villain that he is his opponent now. The pink-haired monster just smiles disdainfully, amused by the F-rank boy's attitude. His friends shout for him to come back, because if he moves forward any further, he'll be out of the teleportation's range. Saki also screams the protagonist's name, desperate and worried for his safety. But Kunan understands the young man's plan and realizes his goal is to sacrifice himself for the group. The countdown continues, and now there are only 3 seconds left for the group's escape. But suddenly the leader Kunan forcefully pushes Saki away from our hero. The protagonist is confused and asks what the swordsman is doing at that moment. With a nervous smile, he looks back, seeing his companions far from him near the portal. Kunan then praises the boy's attitude while the girl looks at him, shocked and confused. The beastman monster realizes that the leader understood the young porter's sacrifice plan. Without hesitation, the enemy lands a powerful punch right in our protagonist's stomach. Fallen to his knees, the villain asks what the boy is plotting while he feels immense pain. The countdown doesn't stop, and now there are only 2 seconds left for the teleportation. Even on the ground and badly injured, Yuki continues to hold the return item's activator firmly. With difficulty, he extends his hand toward his friends in a final effort. The countdown reaches 1 second as the monsters watch the scene with curiosity. Saki then cries upon seeing that the return item has been thrown and is now heading toward her. The Demon King and his servants just watch everything with serious and indifferent expressions. Even injured, the hero smiles and promises that one day he will find a way to defeat them. At that moment, a gloved hand catches the return item in mid-air before it hits the ground. It was Kunan who praises the boy's splendid judgment for having sacrificed himself for the team. With that, the countdown reaches 0 and the teleportation is finally activated. Yuki watches in shock as his companions are enveloped in an intense, golden light. In the blink of an eye, the entire group of adventurers disappears in a great flash of light. With a smile of acceptance, the boy seems satisfied with the outcome of his sacrifice plan. As she disappears into the golden light, Saki shouts Yuki's name with tears streaming down her face. With the portal closed, the protagonist is now alone on his knees, surrounded by the dungeon's monsters. The pink-haired monster approaches and asks if that was the way the boy planned to defeat him. With blood in his mouth, Yuki confirms and says that unlike him, all his friends are high-level heroes. He adds that if they return alive one day, they will surely be able to clear that dungeon. Despite his confidence, the young man feels guilty for having to leave Saki alone again. The villain then lets out a loud laugh, finding it funny that the boy would throw away his life for the future of humans. He praises the boy's madness, saying that it is truly magnificent and impressive. With a smile on his lips, the monster then calls Yuki a human and proposes an unexpected deal. Surprised by the proposal, the protagonist questions what kind of deal the enemy wants to make with him. With his sharp teeth showing, the pink-haired villain just confirms with the word yes. He then reveals that the proposal is for the boy to join them to clear other dungeons. The young man is shocked and shouts, asking why monsters would want to clear dungeons like heroes. The villain explains that they are constantly exposed to crises because of the humans' clearings. The protagonist then realizes that this is the version of the story told from the monster's side. The enemy continues, saying that if humans didn't enter the dungeons, they wouldn't harm them. But instead, their sacrifices only increase every day, like the dragon that was defeated. The boy remembers that the dungeon was estimated to be S rank and dangerous since the investigation. To protect themselves, they need to strengthen the dungeon, and for that, they must clear other bosses and obtain mana. The monster says he cannot allow the tragedies of his subordinates to be repeated anymore. Shocked, our protagonist repeats the word tragedy, not understanding what he means. With that, The boy realizes the villain is like him and asks if he will sacrifice other dungeons. The enemy then confirms that if it's for his subordinates, he will do anything because it's natural. Yuki then agrees, thinking of his family and that if it were for them, he would even give his life. The young man then asks if the monster can swear he will send the humans back if he gets strong. The villain explains that if they are strong enough, the humans will simply stop coming. The boy says he can trust him, but the enemy warns that if he doesn't believe, they will all perish. He adds that he will take many humans with them if that happens in the future. Yuki thinks that if he lets them loose, many sacrifices will occur until his friends defeat them. At that moment, the image of the orphanage in flames comes back to haunt our hero's mind. With that, he understands that this is the only chance to prevent that tragedy from happening again. With his head down, the protagonist finally agrees and says he will cooperate with the villain's plan. He then shakes the monster's hand, sealing the deal between them with a determined look. But the boy shouts that he's not doing this for them, but to protect human beings. The enemy smiles, satisfied with the young man's decision, while his minions watch the scene. With that, the monster declares that from that day on, the protagonist is their collaborator. Yuki then asks if someone like him, without even a class, can really help with anything. The villain holds the boy's hand and says that this is the most important part of it all. He reveals that the monster tamer class can only be chosen by someone with no class. The monsters say the boy is lucky and that they will make good use of an incompetent human like him. But the protagonist says he won't let them do as they please because he will be the one to tame the monsters. The villain then calmly repeats that the monsters will make good use of the boy who was once incompetent. He explains that to go to other dungeons, they need to be summoned, which is why a tamer is necessary. The first condition to become a tamer is to have an empty class column, like our heroes. The second condition is that a contract with a monster is mandatory to get the new class. There are 3 methods to make the contract: fight and defeat, understand, or connect with the creature. The villain holds the protagonist's hand, who curiously asks what the third and final method would be. With a smile on his face, the enemy answers that the last way to make the contract is by force. A red energy then flows from the villain to the boy, forcing the contract and making him cry out in pain. The boy screams in pain, complaining that it hurts, as a strange mark appears on his hand. With wide eyes, the young man stares at his hand, feeling a strange and unexpected connection. Suddenly, a screen appears, and the enemy reveals that he can now see clearly through the boy's eyes. The hero realizes that all his actions are being watched, and that they plan for the chance of betrayal. With the mark on his hand, he understands that he can no longer ask for help from anyone else. The boy then decides he will have to do everything alone, while the monster snaps his fingers. The villain then announces to our hero that all preparations for the clearing are complete. He says he will send Yuki to the surface, but the boy complains that he hasn't made any preparations yet. The enemy says any place will do and for him to enter a dungeon and call him at the right time. The protagonist is confused by the order and asks what he means by the appropriate time. In a dream, the boy shouts in confusion, not understanding what's happening as his friends leave him. Saki looks at him with despair and tears in her eyes, unable to believe what she's seeing. In his mind, the protagonist just says goodbye to his friend with a smile and a wave. The girl then breaks free from her companions and runs to give her friend one last hug. Crying hard, she hugs him tightly, refusing to accept that he is sacrificing himself. The rest of the adventurer group just watches the emotional and sad scene from a distance. But it was all just a nightmare, and the next day we see the facade of a modern building. Our hero then approaches the information desk of the Adventurers Guild. The receptionist assists him and asks in surprise if he intends to clear a dungeon alone. The protagonist thinks he's already run into a problem, and the woman finds it suspicious for someone to go solo these days. The woman then says she will explain the rules because in recent years, clearing dungeons isn't the goal for some. She continues, saying that the activities of adventurers who hunt only for money have greatly increased. It's explained that because of this, dungeon outbreaks are on the rise, as almost everyone acts this way. With this, the boy thinks that the guild probably wouldn't admit out loud that most people do this. To prevent this, the woman says there are safety restrictions for entering new dungeons. The attendant then points to a paper to better explain how the guild's rules work. The document shows the ranks of the adventurers, and that's what determines access to dungeons. To level up, you need to contribute to the guild, but acting alone, this can't be confirmed. The young man scratches his head in frustration because the guild doesn't allow anyone to enter a dungeon without a group. He then reflects that those who enter dungeons alone are having money problems and dreaming of a lucky break. The protagonist then says he wants an F-ranked dungeon to level up, not for money. The receptionist understands and starts typing on the keyboard, looking for a suitable dungeon. She then offers the F-ranked dungeon Labyrinth of Silence, handing him a table with the information. The place is a beginner's dungeon with few monsters, and he is guided to the location's entrance. After arriving at the entrance, the guide unlocks the gate's padlock so the boy can finally enter. With the path clear, the guide then tells our hero to proceed with clearing the dungeon. The young man then thinks that even with the strict security, there's only an emergency button here. Suddenly, the monster's voice echoes in his mind, asking what an abandoned dungeon is. Startled, the protagonist wonders if this direct communication in his head is one of the villain's abilities. The enemy corrects him, saying the ability is his, and the boy shouts that he didn't know because it's the first time. He then reflects that this must be an automatic and permanent skill, which is convenient but strange. The The monster explains that an abandoned dungeon is a place without management, maintenance, or clearings. He continues saying that if a dungeon has resources, adventurers show up, and it is taken care of. In other words, it's a place left behind by humans where monsters reproduce in peace. Over time, the dungeon wouldn't be able to handle the reproduction and would collapse, or at least that's what he thought. Walking through the place, he notices there are no monsters, and the voice in his head complains that it's bored. The boy then wonders if it's possible for a dungeon, even a weak one, to be so empty. Suddenly, a violent tremor begins, and the young man wonders in fear what is happening. Frightened, one of the hidden monsters shouts for our hero to flee from there as quickly as possible. Other adventurers then flee from a green energy while shouting that the dungeon boss has appeared. One of the adventurers screams in fear at the size of the giant slime that appeared out of nowhere. The voice in Yuki's head says that since there were no humans, the monsters ate each other, and that's why the dungeon was empty. The villain adds that this is why only that slimy creature grew so large and became so strong. Seeing the danger, our hero then points to a corridor and shouts for the two to go that way. But the large slime catches up to them, and the protagonist watches the scene, shocked and unsure what to do. The girl gets stuck in the green goo and screams that she can no longer move and has no strength left. Her foot sinks even deeper into the creature, and she lets out a cry of pain, feeling there's no escape. Suddenly, the slime pulls her inside with full force, and our young hero is completely paralyzed. Completely submerged in the goo, the girl seems to be drowning, unable to breathe. Yuki then asks if he can summon the monster, but he says the summoning would destroy everything and everyone. Desperate, the protagonist realizes this is not a good idea and that he needs to think of another plan. Meanwhile, the poor adventurer continues to sink into the slime with no way to escape the monster. Suddenly, the boy has an idea and a glimmer of hope appears in his focused green eyes. He then prepares to act and runs toward the creature, saying that in that case, he will handle it. Without a second thought, the young man dives headfirst into the giant slime to save the girl in danger. The voice in his mind lets out a laugh and says that now he's liking the boy's attitude. The villain calls him impressive and says that he takes action even if it means getting hurt in the process. Inside the slime, the hero manages to reach the girl, and the voice says that he saves what must be saved. Holding the unconscious adventurer, the monster says that so the protagonist was that kind of person. With that, Yuki activates the mark on his hand and tells the Demon King that this is the appropriate time. Holding the girl, the hero shouts and summons the monster Liber with an explosion of red energy. A clawed hand emerges amidst magical symbols as a mysterious voice manifests. The villain's spiritual form appears behind the boy, saying he will let himself be used by his master. With the summoning, the protagonist feels immense pain and ends up spitting up a large amount of blood. Blood runs from his eye, and he thinks it feels like he's being burned from the inside. The monster then tells Yuki not to falter now, as the power is still being channeled. The creature complains that so much power came from just one finger, but for an enemy like this, it's enough. With a sphere of dark energy in hand, the villain's spirit prepares to launch the attack. Together, they then use the powerful ability called Chaotic Donner to destroy the slime. A gigantic explosion of pink and purple energy consumes everything around with immense power. The giant slime is disintegrated by the light, and our hero watches everything, shocked by what he sees. With his eyes still bleeding, the boy thinks that it wasn't a simple attack, it was much more. The adventurer he saved looks up at the sky terrified and says the power was horrifying. With the dungeon ceiling destroyed, the blue sky is visible, and the place looks like a disaster. The other adventurer who is with the girl looks at our protagonist, completely shocked. He says that Yuki is badly injured and that they need to carry him out of there quickly. The protagonist just responds confusedly, not quite understanding what's happening around him. The young man then starts to lose his strength, and his body slowly slumps forward. He thinks it's no use, as he can't stand up anymore, and his vision becomes all blurry. With that, the boy finally passes out and falls to the ground while the two watch him with concern. A few days later, in the dungeon of the Endless Abyss, our hero is in a large hall. He looks at his new E-rank ID and thinks that he leveled up while he was in the hospital. The boy remembers the two carrying him and wonders who really saved whom. Meanwhile, in front of him, a glass of wine is served by someone with an air of mystery. It was the monster Liber, who, with a smile, asks why he has such a sour look on his face. The protagonist questions the toast, as he only managed to summon the villain for a single second. But he corrects himself and thinks that, in fact, the only thing he could do is just call him. The enemy says that at that moment, the young man did not abandon the life that was right in front of him. He continues, saying that without hesitation, the boy grabbed a different option and acted quickly. With that, the monster reveals that he liked that kind of strength and offers a glass to our hero. The boy then understands and accepts the compliment, thanking him as he takes the wine glass from his hand. Liber warns that it's a problem if he's always on the verge of perishing and says to call. Next time, a maid appears out of nowhere and introduces herself, saying it's a pleasure to meet her new master. A status screen then reveals that her name is Elvina and her race is an undead maid. Yuki greets her and thinks she seems to be the cool and composed type at first impression. But the girl says that falling in love at first sight would be a problem, even though she is charming. With a cute demeanor, she explains that this is because, as an undead, she has no pulse to quicken. After the strange joke, the three stand still in the large hall in a moment of silence. The protagonist asks if she'll be okay, but the villain assures him that she is stronger than him. The maid then makes a peace sign and says she wants to be a maid who is easy to talk to and relate to. Liber's voice then says that first, the boy needs to level up to withstand his summoning. With that, the fire monsters guarding the stairs launch their attack without hesitation. But the undead maid moves forward first and lands a powerful punch on one of the creatures. She quickly defeats all the enemies, and the protagonist is shocked by how strong she is. Elvina then boosts, saying of course she managed, because after all, she's a very capable maid. The young man smiles at her attitude and remembers that at the orphanage, there was also someone who annoyed him like that. In a flashback, a little girl shows off to the boy, asking if he doesn't think she's amazing. The protagonist smiles with nostalgia, but suddenly several system screens appear in front of him. He panics because the level up notifications won't stop appearing, and he can't take it anymore. The servant finds it strange that he's complaining about leveling up and wonders if this is a joke among the living. Later, Yuki comments that unlike Liber, he can keep her summoned for a much longer time. The girl explains that the other monster is so powerful that the mana to summon him runs out midway. With that, the boy remembers that he actually only managed to summon the tip of the villain's finger. Elvina then promotes herself as a bargain maid who is a must-buy for her master. The young man smiles at her attitude and says yes, he is counting on her help for the missions. The undead girl seems to get a little embarrassed by the comment and hides behind the sign. Yuki then reflects that for summoning, cost-effectiveness and efficiency are just as important as power. They finally arrive at the boss's door, and the hero wonders how they'll get in as it looks very heavy. The maid then snaps her fingers and asks if her master really doesn't know what she's going to do. Without waiting for an answer, she delivers a powerful kick that shatters the door into 1,000 pieces instantly. She says that no matter the occasion, you should always knock before entering a place. In the center of the room, a knight in imposing armor stands up, ready for battle. The maid then apologizes for the intrusion and moves forward to attack the enemy without hesitation. With a leap, she says that now the dungeon boss will become their sacrifice right there. The knight then raises his flaming sword, preparing to deliver a powerful blow. But our protagonist notices something strange and draws his sword, shouting for her to wait. He notices that the flames on that sword are very different from the ones they've seen so far. With that, the young man throws his sword to intercept the blow and shouts Elvina's name. The enemy's blade is deflected just in time, and the maid narrowly escapes the attack. The sound of clashing metal echoes through the room, and the girl looks on in surprise, not understanding what happened. Yuki pulls her to a safe place, and the servant says that this was to be expected of her master. The undead girl then asks when he realized those were flames of a sacred attribute. The boy replies that he just thought they looked different from the other flames in the dungeon. Additionally, he says they resembled the light his friend Saki often uses in battle. The girl explains that those flames are the natural enemy of all undead beings. She makes a joke about her stopped heart, and the young man complains that it's no time for jokes. The knight's helmet shines brightly, and the protagonist says they need to escape from there. The boss then thrusts his sword into the ground to activate one of his most powerful abilities. A large circle of fire surrounds them, and the technique is called Sanctuary of the Fire Circle. The servant says he is a dungeon boss, and it seems he won't let them escape so easily. Yuki thinks about summoning Liber, but the maid says that with her current power, she is the only option. With this, the boy concludes that they have no other choice but to deal with it themselves. The servant says he has a sharp sense of humor and asks if a tamer is going to fight in front of her. The young man confirms and says yes, because after all, the two of them are battle partners. With a smile, the girl agrees with him and says he's right about them being a duo. She then says for them to fight together and prepares for combat with her fists clenched. The protagonist also gets ready and says he will show her the results of his level ups. The undead girl then turns to the enemy with a serious look and says that if necessary, she will act. The boy then says he remembers something important that could help in the battle against the Fire Knight. He recalls that when he leveled up, he got a new ability that might be useful at that moment. With that, he activates his new technique called Demonic Eye of Truth, and his eye begins to glow. His new ability then analyzes the dungeon boss, revealing its attributes and its main technique. The maid asks if something is wrong, and the technique also shows her information and a danger warning. The knight charges to attack, and the protagonist shouts for his partner to quickly dodge the blow. The young man then pushes the girl aside, managing to save her from the enemy's flame explosion. He holds her tightly to protect her from the impact, and the undead servant looks at him completely surprised. The boy explains that he can now see the attributes and abilities of monsters, and even the danger level. With his eye glowing intensely, he can analyze any adversary he encounters. The girl says that this is a basic skill for a tamer, and thanks him for saving her from danger. But the hero warns that it's still too early to say the technique reveals everything, and the enemy attacks again. The maid dodges the blow and says that with the help of his new ability, things are going to change. Now aware of the dangers, she can finally advance against the knight without fear of being hit. With a confident smile, she says she can now go on the offensive with much more peace of mind. She then lands a powerful punch right on the chest of the enemy's armor, but it seems to have no effect. The protagonist is shocked by the result of that last attack and covers his mouth with his hand. He then warns his partner that it's no use, because her attacks aren't dealing any damage. Using his ability again, the boy says he saw something and that it's actually a fire monster. The maid is confused by the new information and asks what he means by that. The boy explains that the enemy is a fire monster hidden inside the large armor. He continues, saying the creature moves to avoid attacks, which is why the blows aren't hitting the target. With this, the protagonist realizes that if he focuses, he can see the information text moving along with the monster. The maid then says the strategy is set and asks her master not to get distracted by her. The boss then prepares to attack again with his flaming sword and great force. Seeing the danger, the hero shouts for his partner to jump to the right, and she dodges the blow in time. He continues to give precise orders to the servant, who manages to dodge all of the knight's attacks. With a leap, the girl manages to escape another charge that came from below with great speed. Using his ability, the young man reveals the monster's location, saying it's on the right shoulder. Following the order, the maid lands a powerful kick right on the head of the enemy's armor. The knight seems to feel the impact of the blow and reacts for the first time to the girl's attack. But he counterattacks with force, and the protagonist shouts for his partner to retreat and move away. The servant comments that it was the first time the boss showed a reaction, but the boy says he only dodged. The young man is at his limit and says it's almost over as he tries to maintain focus on the battle. With his eye itching, he strains to the utmost to continue using his new analysis ability. Seeing an explosion, the hero grabs his partner and protects her with his body, and she worries about him. The boy then apologizes for having risked himself in that way to save her from danger. The maid then says that her master needs to use the special ability she possesses. The protagonist is confused by the request and asks what kind of technique she wants him to use. A screen then shows the skill Maid of All Nature, which increases all attributes for a time. The servant explains that as a tamer, he can force the activation of the contracted monster's abilities. She continues saying that a scene that technique will boost her stats for just a single moment. The boy understands that he can take him down before he dodges, but since it's a one-time use, timing is crucial. With a smile, the girl says she's sure her master will use the ability at the right time. The protagonist then agrees and says with determination that they will settle this with the next attack. The knight then begins to attack with several blows of light, and danger warnings appear everywhere. The hero shouts for his partner to dodge the continuous attacks, and the girl prepares to evade. He then gives the order for her to stop right there, and the servant obeys her master's command instantly. The young man continues shouting for her to slide to the left, and the girl dodges another blow. Suddenly, a light attack heads toward our hero, who can't react in time to the blow. The boy ends up getting grazed and cries out in pain, while the maid watches everything from a distance. Even injured, he gets up and tells her not to worry about him and to focus only on the battle. He then shouts for his partner to jump to the left, and the servant dodges another attack from the boss. With that, the boy finally activates the ability, and the mark on his hand glows intensely with power. With her stats boosted, the girl leaps into the air and lands a powerful kick right on the enemy's head. The blow is so strong that it creates a large crater in the ground and defeats the knight once and for all. With the dungeon boss defeated, the maid observes the result of her attack with a serious expression. Lying on the ground, the protagonist says with a smile of relief that they finally managed to win. The servant comments that using that ability is very tiring, while the boy remains on the floor. She then bids farewell to her master and disappears in a pink light with an elegant bow. With her eyes closed, the servant says goodbye and vanishes in an elegant, rosy glow. The protagonist then shouts for her to wait, as he can't even get up from the floor. He tries to summon her again, but the mark on his hand shows no reaction. Suddenly, a mysterious voice echoes through the dark hall of the now empty dungeon. It was Lieber, who says the boy finally managed to return to their dungeon after the mission. With a serious look, the monster says it's good to see the young man has returned safely. The hero asks where Elvina is and says he needs to talk to her for leaving him behind. The villain then guides him down a corridor that leads to a bright, beautiful, and well-lit place. Lieber says it was a good thing he came back, or he wouldn't have been able to see her in that special way. The protagonist then sees the maid lying on a bed of flowers and is completely shocked. The enemy explains that this is their way of mourning for those who have passed on in that manner. Shocked, the boy asks if the servant is gone and questions why that happened. The monster reveals that her skill has a powerful effect in exchange for the destruction of her body. The skills screen then appears again to better explain its workings to the boy. With that, the young man finally understands that the usage limit meant it was a one-time sacrifice. With his head down, the hero mourns and realizes the girl paid with her own life for the victory. He then shouts that he didn't order that, and that he only wanted to defeat the dungeon's enemy and nothing more. But the villain tells him to shut up and says her sacrifice was to save their dungeon. With tears in his eyes, the protagonist understands that for them, that sacrifice was worth it in the end. The monster adds that she just did the best job possible for that purpose. Lieber says the responsibility is his, as he is the king of magic and the leader of that place. But the protagonist blames himself and says that the real culprit is him for everything that happened. With tears in his eyes, the boy thinks he should have thought it through better and not just followed her suggestion. He remembers that he couldn't fight until the end, and that it's his fault for being so weak. Crying, he once again blames himself for being weak and not being able to protect her until the end. With that, the monster promises he will make him stronger until he can summon him in battle. The young man then gets up and asks if there is any tamer skill that can revive the maid. The villain replies that there isn't, as tamers only use and consume monsters, they don't fix them. A tear runs down the hero's face, who is completely devastated by the terrible news. Suddenly, a new servant appears and tells Lieber that it's not nice to be so mean. The newcomer's name is May, and she says everyone should have already reached a conclusion on the matter. But she adds that the boy wasn't included in the discussion, so it wasn't really everyone. The protagonist then uses his ability and realizes she is one of the Demon King's executives. His analysis reveals she has holy magic and a resurrection skill with certain conditions. With this, our hero is completely shocked by the discovery and what it could mean. The new maid then asks with a smile if he wants to know how to revive his departed friend. With eyes full of hope, the young man asks if his partner can really come back to life. He points to May and shouts that with her ability, Elvina can finally be resurrected. The girl winks and says that since he saw her skill, there's no need to explain how it works. But the boy says he can only see the effect, that there are conditions for the resurrection. The monster says that if the skill is newly awakened, that's what he can see and asks May to explain. With that, the girl formally introduces herself, saying she is the head maid, named Mi. She continues, saying she takes care of everyone in the dungeon, being the group's support and resurrection. The protagonist then repeats the words support and resurrection, completely focused on that. The servant asks if the human is there to eliminate them like they did to the dragon in the image. She reveals that she is an insurance for the worst-case scenario, and that she resurrects those who perish so the dungeon doesn't end. Our hero then gets excited, but the girl reminds him that he himself saw that there are conditions. First, she explains that the ability uses a tremendous amount of mana, being very inefficient. The maid gives the example that if she were to take him down and then revive him, the cost would be enormous. She adds that to revive a human, she would need enough mana to create a dungeon floor. With this, the boy reflects and wonders what the cost would be to bring Elvina back to life. The servant replies with a serious look that their dungeon would become significantly smaller. The protagonist thinks that if the dungeon shrinks in size, it would be much easier for others to conquer. The servant confirms and says that's why one of her companions was against the idea of using their own mana. With this, the boy has an idea and asks if they can't gather the unused mana over time. Mai explains that the second condition is that the person's mana needs to be on site for the resurrection to happen. She adds that Elvina's mana will disappear in 10 days, and that's why they need more energy from somewhere else. With a smile, the girl confirms yes, and our hero remains confused about her plan to resolve the situation. The maid then reveals that she was thinking of having the humans themselves help them with this task. With a smile, she adds that the humans would have to clear a much larger dungeon to get the mana. The boy finally understands that if they steal mana from other dungeons, the resurrection can be done without problems. Liber then says that this is one of the objectives, but the dungeons they've cleared so far aren't enough. Yuki wonders how much mana is needed, and the servant says she knows nothing about the human adventurer's ranks. She reveals that she suggested they conquer a large dungeon, but all the other monsters got angry at the idea. The villain says he cannot expose the plan that Elvina protected with her life to mortal danger once again. With a clenched fist, our hero then offers to undertake the dangerous and difficult mission alone. The monster says this is reckless and that without a plan, the boy would end up like his former battle partner. The young man agrees but says that if this is the only way to save her, he has to try even if it's risky. With a determined look, he states that he simply cannot choose any other path to follow now. The boy then faces the villain and reminds him of the contract the two made at the beginning of their whole journey. With a tear in his eye, Liber agrees, but it seems he has something more to say to the young hero. A drop of blood falls on the grass, and the villain says that in that case, he will do what is necessary to help. With that, the Demon King summons one of his minions and tells him to train our protagonist. Yuki then recognizes the man in the suit and remembers that he fought against Saki at the beginning of the adventure. The servant calls him Viento and says that with the boy's current strength, many sacrifices will be inevitable. With a serious and worried look, the monster Liber just nods his head and says he understands. He then entrusts the young man to his minion for the next 7 days, and the butler accepts the order at once. Without wasting time, the new trainer turns and tells our hero to follow him for the training. The boy then agrees and runs after him while Liber and May watch the two walk away. The maid says she is relieved that Viento is strong, but the Demon King tells her to go with them. He then reflects that the butler was completely against using a human until the very last second. With this, Liber fears that his minion might overdo it and end up taking the boy's life in the process. The servant is surprised by her master's unexpected order, but seems to understand his concern. Meanwhile, Viento and our protagonist are teleported to another place by a magic circle. The young man observes everything with a focused and attentive look, preparing for what might happen next. Upon arriving at a castle, he is amazed and wonders if this is really inside a dungeon. The butler explains that this is a fraction of Liber's power and each executive has a floor to use. He adds that the boy is the first human to see their floors, and that this is an honor. The hero then thinks that resurrection must be a last resort to require so many floors. With that, he asks what the training entails and if Viento will just help him level up. The trainer explains that leveling up is the act of taking mana from monsters and mixing it into oneself. The protagonist understands that adventurers cause damage to the dungeon just by fighting and stealing its mana. The butler explains that the contract with Liber prevents him from leveling up since he already shares the dungeon's mana. The young man understands why he was sent to other dungeons and asks how Viento intends to train him then. Suddenly, a sword flies in his direction and the protagonist catches it in the air, completely surprised by the action. With the new weapon in hand, he thinks the training is just about improving his battle equipment. But Vienna says there is much to teach as the boy has built nothing useful for himself up to that point. He adds that the young man possesses no strength, knowledge, or talent, and therefore has nothing in his favor. Startled, our hero shouts and asks why the butler is doing all this so suddenly. The trainer explains that if he wants to save Alvina, he needs to build the strength and skills he lacks. Surrounded by an aura of power, Vienna says the boy needs to build absolutely everything to get strong. The protagonist defends himself from a blow and thinks he won't have time if he stops to think because the enemy is too fast. The butler then says that if he can't even keep up with his movements, he can't entrust his fate to him. With that, Yuki realizes that his opponent's intention is to really fight seriously without holding back. Vienta then announces that he himself will make the judgment to decide if the boy is worthy to continue the plan. He adds that his decision will be for the best for the dungeon and especially for Lord Liber. The young man then understands that for the butler, it would make no difference if he ended up perishing there. The challenge is set, and now the hero needs to survive for 3 hours to master his new sword. With that, the training begins and the two face off in a fierce and very intense sword battle. With a determined look, the protagonist shouts that he will come back to life with the will to perish if necessary. Suddenly, a skill screen appears in his eye, which begins to glow with a powerful golden light. With that, he activates his magic eye of truth to analyze the enemy while Viento prepares an attack. The screen reveals the butler's ability, which is called Blued Flower Blade of the Water Attribute. The protagonist realizes that any blow is fatal and wonders if the power difference is too great. With that, he understands that if he can't defend, he needs to move to where he can't see the danger. Vienta then advances and asks mockingly if that is the only ability the boy can use. Without hesitation, the trainer attacks with his purple sword in a powerful blow that goes straight for the young man. The butler kicks him away and says his judgment is slow and that he only thinks after being blocked. He adds that fighting that way is the same as asking to be easily defeated. Our hero tries to defend himself from the fast attacks, but the enemy is much stronger and more experienced than him. With the danger alert in his eye, the boy tries his best not to get hit by the blows. Even so, he doesn't give up and prepares to try a new strategy with the butler's next attack. With that, the protagonist advances with his sword glowing blue, ready to counterattack with everything. But the trainer easily blocks the blow and says that forcing the offensive won't change the outcome. In the blink of an eye, the butler uses a swift attack that throws the young man far away with no chance of defense. Lying on the ground, the protagonist spits up blood and realizes how great the power difference between them is. The trainer observes him with a serious look and seems to be analyzing the boy's progress in the battle. Even injured, the hero gets up, and Vienda says his movements have improved a bit since the beginning. The boy then reveals that he saw the sword's movements and the most efficient way to defend against the blows. He shouts that his eye can understand how a monster moves and not just see the enemy's stats. The butler seems surprised and says it appears the young man isn't just watching the battle happen. Even so, he states with a serious look that it's still not enough to defeat him. Vieno says their physiques are different, and therefore the boy has no chance against his attacks. He continues, saying that even the strength of his arms with the sword doesn't compare to the young man's. The protagonist is shocked to realize the butler was holding back the entire time in the battle. With that, the trainer throws him back and says their battle experience is also incomparable. The young man feels his body is at its limit, and the danger signs in his vision only increase with each second. But he realizes the worst part is that the butler didn't use magic and won only with his impressive swordsmanship. Even so, the boy doesn't give up and charges forward with all he has, shouting that he can still reach him somehow. The trainer is impressed by his spirit and wonders if it's courage or just recklessness. With a serious look, he decides to test the boy's determination with a new, much more powerful attack. Suddenly, the butler activates one of his abilities, and a dark, red aura completely surrounds him. The hero's vision fills with danger alerts, and he can no longer see anything clearly. He understands that if he doesn't identify the attack, he will perish, and that he doesn't need the danger information. What he needs now is information about the technique, and for that, he must shift the focus of his vision. With that, the protagonist concentrates to obtain the information that will save his life from the blow. He then ignores the alerts, and the screen reveals the skills description, which explains how it works. The Blued Flower Blade technique turns blood into blades and repeatedly attacks the target. Even injured, the young man now understands how the ability works and prepares for the impact of the blow. With that, a large explosion of red energy consumes everything around with overwhelming power. The butler then observes the result of the attack with an expression of surprise and curiosity on his face. Lying in the rubble, the protagonist is badly injured but seems to have survived the blow somehow. The protagonist suddenly wakes up in a soft bed and is confused, not understanding what happened. Sitting in an armchair, Vienna watches him and asks if the boy has finally awakened from his slumber. The butler then gets up and, with a serious look, tells our hero to follow him to another place. The young man remembers the attack and thinks he surely managed to steal the ability at the last moment. He then realizes he has no injuries, and Vienna reveals that May healed him before he passed out. The trainer comments that although it was a crude imitation, the boy's action was bold. He adds that trying to steal his technique at the last second was something impressive to see. With that, the butler admits he is now a little more interested in seeing how far the boy can go. He then warns that from now on, the serious training will begin, leaving the young man confused. Without giving any more explanations, the trainer opens a large door, revealing what's on the other side. The place is full of monsters, and Vienna says that as a start, our hero will face all of them. The protagonist is completely shocked and breaks into a cold sweat at the number of enemies to fight. The butler says the number is high but asks the boy to deal with them and show his power. With a smile, the young man wields his sword and thinks he never imagined he would get used to this. With his eye glowing, he prepares for battle, saying he's already gotten used to an expected demise. Days later, we see the hero in a suit, and he wonders why on earth he is in this situation. It turns out he's serving tea to a goblin and a bat monster while looking bored. Viento explains that a first-class swordsman wastes no movements in his daily actions. He says that a butler's work allows for not even a moment of distraction or the tremor of a finger. The trainer adds that the young man needs to learn to use his whole body and also his high. The boy asks if it's about his ability, and Viento explains that skills grow with use. The butler points to several monsters and tells the young man to read what each of them desires there. With a determined smile, the hero says he will first observe his movements to learn. Then Viento demonstrates how to serve the tea perfectly without spilling a single drop. He fully concentrates on the task, showing impeccable and elegant posture. With a professional air, the butler shows the result of his precise and efficient movements. The protagonist then tries to imitate him and balances a stack of plates with a confident smile. But suddenly, the plates fall and shatter into 1,000 pieces, leaving the boy completely shocked. While cleaning up the mess, he thinks that even by observing, it's hard to do it with his own body. With this, he understands that just imitating doesn't work and that he needs to adapt everything to his own style. On the second day, one of the monsters asks if he's the guy that the newcomer Lord Vint took a liking to. The red creature then approaches our hero with a curious and interested look. With a smile, he says that this means the boy must be very strong to have caught his attention. The young man replies that he's in the process of getting stronger, but the monster suddenly interrupts him. Without warning, the creature lands a powerful punch on him and shouts that then he will train him himself. Lying on the ground, the hero thinks he will compensate for his lack of stamina by using his ability. With his eye glowing intensely, he prepares to dodge the red monster's attacks. The protagonist observes Vince and the other monster's movements to analyze the situation. With that, he prepares to test his new combat strategy against the adversary. After the training, the boy seems to have evolved and now faces his challenges with more confidence. On the fourth day of training, our hero faces a purple lizard monster that seems to be cold. His ability reveals that the creature has the chilled status effect and he needs to deal with it. With that, he covers it with his shirt, thinking he needs to analyze, predict, and move to deal with everyone. With a smile, the young man then asks if the monster wants him to bring something hot to drink. The creature is happy, and the protagonist realizes that monsters are diverse and different from humans. While serving tea to the creature, he begins to better understand the purpose of that training. Viento watches from afar, and the boy finally understands why he chose that type of training. Reaching the sixth day, a cute bat appears flying, and his ability says it's hungry. With a plate of food, he says all he needs to do is predict the movements and act accordingly. But suddenly, the creature attacks him and bites his neck hard, leaving the boy surprised. The monster's skill is vampirism, and the young man falls to the ground, completely drained after the attack. On the seventh day, the protagonist already looks like a master and serves the tea with impressive skill. The cup is served perfectly, without trembling or spilling a single drop, showing his evolution. With a confident smile and a clenched fist, the hero asks his master what he thought. Viento tastes the tea and says the flavor and words were bad, but his posture was approved. During those 7 days, the cycle was from battle to tea, a party, and back to battle. With a tired look, the boy feels that somehow he managed to make it just in time at the last moment. The young man looks at the ceiling and thinks he finally made it, but his joy is short-lived. Suddenly, Viento says no and that the real end of that training begins right now. With a red aura, he activates his skill, Beautiful Blade of the Blood Flower, ready for the final test. The protagonist prepares for battle and recognizes the ability his master is about to use. Viento says the boy now uses his high instantly and has already imitated the technique before without realizing. With a serious look, the butler tells him not to just imitate the skill, but to truly make it his own. The trainer then warns him that if he fails to do so, he will certainly end up departing from this life. But the young hero says there's no need to warn him, as he already knows he deserves that if he ends up failing. With his eye glowing intensely, he then focuses all his attention on analyzing his opponent. The skill's description appears, and the boy says he can now see it in much more detail than before. With the sword in hand, he prepares for the final battle against his master with a focused look. He then understands how to use his body and cuts his own hand to use his blood for the new technique. With that, the protagonist finally activates his own version of the Beautiful Blade of the Blood Flower. The two then clash in a collision of blades and blood with overwhelming and intense power. In a quick and precise move, the young man manages to overcome his master and disarms him with his sword. But suddenly, the butler kicks him away and our hero is shocked, not understanding what happened. Lying on the ground, Viento laments and says it was a shame because he was just one step away from winning. A pool of blood forms on the floor, and the boy thinks he still hasn't managed to save his friend. With bloodied hands, he shouts at his master not to decide his limits on his own. Without hesitation, the young man then dips his hand into the pool of blood to try the technique once more. With that, a new skill screen appears, and he activates his skill once more with more power. Viento is shocked to see that the boy has remodeled the technique and made it his own unique style. With a determined look, he shouts if the butler really thought he would give up just because he failed. The protagonist shouts that this is a battle quantity and attacks Vint with everything he has now. With a great flash of light, the boy then launches his most powerful attack against the adversary. He then shouts and asks what the butler thought of his new and powerful battle ability. But Vieno stops the blade with his hand and praises the boy, calling him splendid and by his name Yuki. Though exhausted, our hero asks with a serious look what the trainer thought of his attack. The master says he can't use that technique in succession, and the young man seems to agree with him. With his body trembling, the protagonist admits he's already at his limit and can't fight anymore. At that, the boy starts to fall, but Vienna catches him before he hits the ground, completely exhausted. The butler says there's still much to teach as he carries him, but his cell phone vibrates on the hall floor. The message on the screen is from Saki and says she found the dungeon exploration he asked for. Elsewhere, the girl looks at some papers and wonders if her friend will be okay on his own. She seems to be in an office and remains worried even though it's a joint operation. The document she holds reveals that the mission is about exploring a B-ranked dungeon. The B-ranked dungeon has a still unknown boss, and a strange blue cross glows in the location. Back in the hall, Yuki tells Lieber that tomorrow he will conquer a B-ranked dungeon. With a smile, the Demon King comments that it seems the boy has finally acquired some strength. The butler says his manners are knave, but now he can use a sword a little. The Demon King then asks if an E rank like our hero can really enter a B-ranked dungeon. The young man explains that it's not a conquest and that he's going as investigation support, just like a porter. Viento understands that the boy's intention is to conquer the dungeon when he finds an opening. The Demon King then asks which of the monsters he intends to make a new contract with. With a mysterious smile, the protagonist thinks for a bit before giving his final answer. The butler, Viento, stares at him with a serious and slightly surprised expression at the boy's choice. The servant, May, is also shocked by the young man's decision and can't hide her surprise. With wide eyes, Lieber then asks if our hero is really serious about that. The next day at the Adventurers Guild, Saki appears and waves at Yuki with a big smile. The blue-haired girl seems very happy to see him again and calls his name with great enthusiasm. Surprised, he asks how she knew he started using a sword, and she just smiles at him. The boy apologizes for the favor, but she says it's alright, as she gets many requests like that one. With a wink, she adds that it actually helps to have someone she knows around. At that moment, another adventurer approaches and calls for Lady Saki in a very lively tone. A group of 3 men tells them to hurry up, and the leader asks who our hero is. Yuki wonders if they are members of the group, but the girl quickly says they are not, in any way. She explains that they are volunteers who accepted a request from the guild and were not invited by her. Saki continues, saying they want to rank up by doing low-risk missions with an S ranker. The group's leader then points to the boy and asks if he's an A rank for being with her. The girl says that Yuki is an E rank, and he confirms it, asking if that's some kind of problem. The adventurer then laughs and shouts that our protagonist is weaker than all of them. The group protests, saying an E rank will be a burden, and that she should take the 3 B rankers with her. But she ignores them and comments to the young man that he has already conquered 2 dungeons alone, right? Our hero thinks that technically, he didn't conquer the dungeons alone since he had help from the monsters. The other adventurers mock him, saying that no one of a low rank makes dungeon conquests like that. Their leader complains that he wanted to take advantage of Saki's fame to become an A rank adventurer quickly. With that, he says that having a solo conqueror there will make it harder for him to be well evaluated by the guild. Saki then interrupts him and says she has told him several times that this is just an investigation mission. With a smile, she then prepares to explain the target of the investigation, which is their dungeon itself. The group then advances to the Sealed Cave of Desires, a dungeon estimated to be B rank. She explains that a dungeon's rank is almost always decided by the threat level of its main boss. The protagonist then asks how they can know the threat level of that dungeon's boss. The answer is revealed on an old map, and it's about the complexity of the entire dungeon's structure. The first rule is that the stronger the boss, the more complex and wider the first floor of the location is. She adds that the more floors and tricks the boss has, the more difficult the entire mission will be. According to the data, this is a small dungeon with narrow paths and 2 floors, which is why it's B rank. But she reveals that the problem is that no matter which floor they search, the boss is not found. The boss is so elusive that the investigation request ended up coming to her, even though it's not her area of expertise. Suddenly, a giant worm-like monster emerges from the ground, attacking the group by surprise. The leader of the volunteers shouts that the prey is his and tells no one to touch the monster he's going to hunt. With his axe, he then attacks the creature with a powerful blow that cuts it into several pieces. The adventurer Gato then brags to Saki, saying he defeated the monster splendidly. Saki gets annoyed because taking out monsters is not part of the request, and Yuki thinks being an S rank is tough. Gato then approaches our hero and calls him an E ranker with a mocking and superior tone. He tells the boy not to do anything, because as long as they are there, Lady Saki is completely safe. But suddenly, the adventurer's face contorts into an expression of panic and fear, without understanding anything. A giant stone golem emerges from behind him and stares at him with its intensely glowing yellow eyes. The stone creature then multiplies, and now an army of golems threatens the entire group of heroes. Seeing the danger, Saki and our protagonist prepare to fight the monsters with serious expressions. The girl then charges forward with her sword and activates one of her abilities to attack the stone enemies. With a focused look, she uses her luminous slash technique once more with all her strength and power. Gaito is shocked by the girl's speed and admits he couldn't even see her attack properly. Saki then says she doesn't need them as combat power and only needs them to investigate the area. Our hero apologizes and says he intended to cut the monster so as not to get in her way during the fight. It turns out the boy cut the golem into pieces with a single, precise, and very powerful blow. Surprised, the girl asks if he happened to synchronize his attack with the exact timing of her strike. The young man nods and says yes, because the battle seemed too difficult for her to fight alone. Saki is impressed, thinking about how he managed to keep up with her movements against an enemy. With a flushed face, she realizes the impact was light because he helped her and that he's stronger than she expected. With a smile, she then praises him and says he wasn't bad at all in that battle against the monsters. Yuki looks at the wall and comments that dungeons are absurd for making monsters come out of nowhere. The adventurer then tells the others to focus on the investigation and leave the fighting to her from now on. Gato gets annoyed and thinks he needs to find the boss room to make a contribution and rank up. Even after 10 hours of exploration and fighting against the stone monsters of the dungeon, the group of adventurers led by Saki continues to search for any important clue. But they find no trace of the boss room, leaving everyone completely frustrated. The blue-haired girl then walks thoughtfully, trying to find a solution to the mystery. She says there is no place that seems to lead to the next floor of that strange dungeon. Suddenly, our protagonist touches a wall and asks what's on the other side. Gato then calls him an E-ranker and laughs, saying that as expected he knows nothing about dungeons. He explains that a dungeon is an alternate dimension made of mana and that it's not a real cave. Kicking the wall, he continues, saying that even though it looks like a cave, things are different. The adventurer warns him that if he digs into the wall, he'll just hit a layer of mana and get hurt. With his eye glowing, the young man says that to him. Things don't seem like what he's describing. Gaito is confused and doesn't understand, asking what the boy means by that statement. With his ability activated, he reveals that the wall and the cave are made of the same material as the golems. The analysis shows that the race is a clay golem and its attribute is earth, which shocks everyone there. Saki then understands everything and tells everyone to move away as she activates her luminous slash skill. With a powerful blow, she destroys the wall into 1,000 pieces, revealing a secret passage. Surprised by the discovery, the girl shouts for everyone to enter the hole she just opened. The group then advances through the new, dusty passage filled with rock debris everywhere. With a serious look, the protagonist observes what's on the other side with great attention and curiosity. Everyone is shocked to see a giant golem made of other golems, as if it were a single being. Gato asks in fear what that thing is and can't believe the size of the monster. Saki then reveals that they weren't inside a dungeon the whole time as they thought. In fact, they were inside a giant golem that was pretending to be a dungeon. The adventurer shouts and asks why on earth a monster would do something like that to them. With a serious look, the girl replies that the reason was to deceive the guild's rank assessment. Our protagonist understands that this is the real first floor and that the rank is much higher. The place has a super large scale that gives the illusion of being outside because it's so vast. With this, Saki states that the dungeon is undoubtedly A rank and is close to becoming an S rank. The young man and the girl look at each other, worried about the level of danger they are facing there. With a communicator in hand, she announces that she will first share the information with the guild. The message reveals that this is a super large A rank dungeon, not a B rank one. The deserted first floor contains only golems disguised as a dungeon to deceive adventurers. Saki looks to the horizon and spots a castle floating in the air, leaving everyone surprised by the sight. Gato asks if the giant golem will move anymore, and she says it shut down to conserve mana. The adventurer asks what the monster's duty was, and the girl replies that it was to prevent a conquest. With a serious look, she comments that monsters are intelligent enough to think so far ahead. Gato says that monsters are just wild animals, but she explains that dungeons are front lines. Yuki remembers the monsters from Liber's dungeon and thinks that they have intelligence and strategy. With a thoughtful look, he adds that some of them even have feelings. The blue-haired girl then agrees and says yes, because monsters are not just wild animals. Saki says it's a blessing because they found the danger before it became S rank and can now attack the boss. With that, she faces the golem and declares that the investigation is over and the dungeon conquest begins. The girl then points to the exit and tells the other adventurers to go back and report everything to the guild. But our hero says he can't go back now and that he will stay to fight alongside his friend. The adventurer then turns to the boy and asks if he is really going with her into battle. With focused eyes, the protagonist faces her, and her image is reflected in his green pupils. With a smile, she asks if he's sure and says she needs someone to carry information. She then points to the young man's chest and states that of everyone there, he is the best choice for the mission. Suddenly, the girl grabs him by the collar of his shirt, leaving the boy completely surprised by her action. With a serious look, she says that this time the two of them are going home together, no matter what. The young man then agrees with his partner and replies that yes, of course they will go back together this time. With that, he remembers the orphanage and Elvina and vows that he will not let anyone else go ever again. The girl then picks him up with a smile and says for them to go as the word ability echoes. With that, she uses her luminous formula skill to fly at high speed, carrying Yuki with her. Left behind, the other adventurer is blinded by the light and complains that he can't see anything. With an irritated look, he says he's not going home like that and refuses to give up on the mission. Suddenly, a piece of the golem with a glowing core falls to the ground right in front of the man. With that, Gato uses the item to create a shortcut and shouts that they will take the shortest path. Meanwhile, Saki and our hero arrive in a throne room, and a voice questions them in surprise. A mana explosion occurs, and Yuki wonders if this is the deepest part of the dungeon. A pink crystal creature appears, and our hero asks if she is the boss of this dungeon. She introduces herself as Karat, the jewel golem, and says she will become the most beautiful demon lord. The young man then understands that she was secretly accumulating mana, and the villainess confirms it. With a smile, the enemy says that little by little, she has been polishing her own beauty there. Suddenly, the dungeon boss activates her ability called Karat's Critical Cutter. With that, she charges to attack and shouts for the protagonist to be enchanted by her battle power. But the boy is not shaken and activates his own skill, which is called Demon's Eye. The villainess is surprised because with her technique, she can create several clones and attack at once. The young man realizes the blow is very fast and would be fatal if it hit him head on at that moment. But he remembers his training with Viento and says it's not scary as he blocks the attack. Annoyed, the enemy shouts that it's useless because her body is much harder than the golems he faced. Our hero agrees with her statement as he firmly holds his sword with both hands. With that, he says all he needs to do is create an opening so his partner can attack. With the boss distracted, Saki takes the chance and uses her Luminous Slash ability once more. The blow hits true, and the villainess is shocked to see that the girl managed to scratch her arm. The adventurer then says her body is hard, but that it's certainly not completely unbreakable. The protagonist observes the scene and thinks that just like the golems, S-rank skills are truly absurd. The dungeon boss complains that the blow hurt, but seems to be enjoying the pain she felt. Saki notices that the enemy hasn't lost her composure, and that there's surely something more behind it. With that, the young man warns her not to let her guard down and asks his partner what's next. The girl says she will finish the boss with a combo, and the protagonist agrees with the plan. But the villainess says with a smile that she has already seen their weakness and prepares to counterattack. With that, she activates her skill Karat Colossal Creation and shouts that she has found a weak spot. Our hero realizes she used a lot of mana, but Saki is confused because nothing happened in the hall. Suddenly, the adventurer realizes what is happening and shouts that it can't be, no way. The giant golem regenerates outside, and Gato shouts that the path to the gate has been blocked. The boss then warns that if they don't save the other adventurers, everyone there will end up perishing. Saki understands that she is taking materials from other golems and says their situation is very bad. She thinks they won't make it if they waste time and that taking her eyes off the enemy could be the end. The protagonist then calls his partner and, with a serious look, tells her to go save the others now. The boy adds that they cannot leave the creature unsupervised under any circumstances. With his sword in hand, the young man says with a determined look that he will stop her by himself. With a smile, the adventurer agrees and says she will leave the task of fighting in his hands. She then runs and shouts to her partner that they will have a party when they return from the mission. The villainess then mocks him and asks if the one who couldn't even scratch her will stay behind as a sacrifice. But the protagonist corrects her and says she's wrong because that is actually called trust. He then remembers Liber and Viento and says his friend also trusted him for that mission. The young man states that their positions are different, but that because they believe in him, he is there. With that, an aura of fire surrounds him, and he says that's why he needs to respond to that trust. The dungeon boss is shocked and asks how he has the power of a monster like that. With that, the boy declares that from now on, he will fight like a true monster tamer. Wielding his sword, he warns that the technique belongs to a monster much stronger than the villainess. Hit head-on, the enemy shouts and wonders how the young man actually managed to cut her. With his eye glowing, he says he saw through her technique and used her movements without waste. Annoyed, the dungeon boss shouts that she will remake her technique and activates the skill, Karat Healing Cut. She then says he won't be able to parry this form, and that she will entangle and skewer him to the end. The protagonist then challenges her and says that a blade like that will never be able to reach him. The villainess mocks him, saying he's full of openings, and with a smile shouts that she finally got him. The boy attacks her, but the enemy hits him, and he says he let her get his arm on purpose. Shocked by the young man's action, the dungeon boss lets out an awe, not understanding his plan. He then shouts that he will use her own hardness and attacks her with a powerful, direct blow to her body. The villainess realizes the hero has been using her from the beginning to attack and shatters into pieces. With the mark on his hand, the protagonist shows her the power of a true monster tamer. The enemy then shouts that she will not forgive him for damaging her precious crystal shell so much. But the young man says with a serious look that naturally, the battle won't end with just that. With that, he says he will show her real skill and activates the Karat Change Curse class. The dungeon boss then uses compression, polishing, and decoration to create something new and powerful. She says she won't turn him into part of her collection as she did with other adventurers before. With a look of hatred, the villainess shouts that she will grind him until he becomes just a grain of sand in the desert. With that, she transforms and declares herself the hardest and most beautiful golem, the great master of the dungeon Karat. With a war cry, our hero charges forward with everything to attack the new form of the dungeon boss. The villainess then thinks that, as she imagined, she can't use that massive crystal properly. With a smile, the boy taunts her and asks if she and the golem aren't lacking a bit of talent. But the enemy laughs and says that jewels are more valuable the larger they are and attacks the young man. The protagonist dodges the blow and says no, and that actually what's really important is something else. With his sword in hand, he states that what's important is how beautifully you can cut the jewel. With that, he activates Viento's skill, Beautiful Blade of the Blood Explosion, with a focused look. Blood splatters on his face as he prepares the powerful attack he learned in his training. The dungeon boss is shocked and wonders why a human has the same skill as a monster. The young man then replies with his eyes closed that this is actually his own fighting style. With that, a shower of blood blades heads toward the enemy with overwhelming power. The villainess reflects the attack in her eye and realizes she managed to narrowly dodge all the blades. Our hero seems exhausted and says he somehow managed to use the technique in a real battle. But he looks at his hand and says the blood is still too heavy for him to use perfectly. The boy then turns to leave while the defeated enemy crumbles into pieces on the floor. But she regenerates and says she used almost her entire body and that his skill is too powerful. Suddenly, the villainess appears behind him and says it seems the price for that ability was quite high. The young man then blocks the blow and says he had already warned her that he saw through all her movements. With that, he attacks her, but the enemy says it seems our protagonist is also at his limit. In a final effort, the boy uses his blood to create an explosion that destroys the villainess for good. The boy then reveals that his fighting style is his own version of the Beautiful Blade of the Blood Flower. The villainess is shocked and asks what he can do with his body in such an injured and tired state. A bloodstain spreads across the young man's shirt, who seems to be at his absolute limit. But the protagonist says that alone, he can do nothing and activates the mark on his hand to summon something. With that, a shadow appears and from it emerges a small cute bat, to everyone's surprise. Suddenly, the small creature spits out all the blood it drank to help its master in battle. In a flashback, Viento and Vint watch the boy preparing to fight with the bat's help. The servant May holds the creature and explains that it can suck blood and use it as a meal substitute. It turns out the skill requires a lot of blood, and if he lets the bat suck beforehand, the chances increase. But the boy can only make a contract with one monster, and his near-departure status puts him in a crisis. With a serious look, the young man says that's why he needs to land the second hit and uses his own blood. Viento then warns him, saying that at that moment, he will surely be close to departing for good. The protagonist says that in other words, he is inducing the opponent's carelessness with his weakness. Vint then praises him, saying he has approached the realm of the strongest vampire that ever existed. The young man remembers the bat drained him during training and says he will make it work a little. With that, the villainess realizes that from the beginning, our hero was aiming for a powerful second attack. The boy says he will return the introduction, and his sword glows with incredible, renewed power. He then declares that he is the monster tamer Yuki, an adventurer who fights using everything he has. The enemy shouts the word, monster, as she is cut in half with no chance to defend against the blow. With a determined look, the protagonist says he uses enemies and allies to win his battles. With the battle finally over, the villainess explodes in an intense light, and several crystal shards fly. With the bat on his shoulder, the boy says he is human but ended up making a contract with a demon lord. A purple aura surrounds him, and he says that is the dungeon's magic and that he feels his eyes burn with the power. With the mark glowing on his hand, he states that this amount of mana should be more than enough. The young man then absorbs all the purple energy with his hand to send it to Liber's dungeon. Exhausted, he starts to fall and calls for Liber, saying that now he is counting on his help for everything. Suddenly, Saki appears and catches him in her arms, shouting his name and apologizing for the delay. The girl is shocked and asks if he defeated the boss alone, and the boy just apologizes. Leaning on her, he says he can't stand because of anemia and asks her to help him get out. Days later, a crowd of reporters with cameras gathers for an important press conference. A man in a suit at the podium thanks everyone for coming and prepares to give the big news. He then reveals that a special situation occurred regarding the A-ranked dungeon that was investigated. With that, he announces that after explaining the details, the person involved will report everything directly. The photographers shout to take the picture because this will surely be tomorrow's newspaper headline. The man then calls to the stage the person who contributed most to clearing that dangerous dungeon. Two reporters comment that the fake dungeon part is already big news and what an amazing adventurer. Saki then takes the stage and is announced as the great S-rank adventurer who solved the mystery. The crowd shouts that is expected of the innocent Ray and the white Flash. She accomplished the feat. A reporter then asks if intelligent monsters appeared, even though it was announced as A-rank. The adventurer asks for silence and says she will first give an overview of the entire dungeon conquest. The girl complains that Yuki always pushes things onto others to do in his place. In a flashback, the boy says he has something important to do and asks her to take care of everything. The adventurer shouts for him to at least finish healing, but the young man is already gone, and she is left alone. With a serious look, she wonders what could be so important for him to run off like that. The protagonist arrives at Liber's dungeon and asks Viento how the servant's resurrection is going. May then says they are finishing the last part of the ritual, and a purple aura surrounds her with power. The butler warns the boy to stop watching, as the large amount of magic will burn his eyes. Even so, the young man says he can feel the immense power even just standing nearby. Holding Elvina, the servant says that is head-made. She will not allow her to remain in the afterlife. With that, the girl activates her maiden order's skill, and purple chains appear for the ritual. Lying on the bed of flowers, Elvina slowly opens her eyes and says, "Oh my," with a soft voice. The protagonist then shouts her name, happy to see the resurrection was successful in the end. The girl is confused and wonders why her master is there, and if he has passed on too. With a smile, the young man shouts no, and it was actually she who came back to life at that moment. The head maid then appears, and the boy says he was startled, thinking she had sacrificed herself for nothing. With a sigh of relief, the protagonist sits beside the bed to talk to her better. He then says with a smile that he's happy she seems healthy and well after everything. The girl asks if this is an undead joke, and the boy invites her for a celebratory kiss. Suddenly, Viento appears and says the two have work to do and tells them to get changed now. May then tells Alvina that her rest time is over and chains lock her coffin. The boy asks if he will have to work as a butler again, and the servant asks if he has that role. Viento says it's nothing like that, and the head maid celebrates that it's time to change clothes. In his new suit, our hero looks like a real butler and is even a little embarrassed. He says the outfit is a bit much, but the monster informs him that today, he is the main star. With white gloves, the trainer opens the door to the grand hall so the young man can finally enter. Several monsters then surround him and thank him for saving them in such a heroic way. The protagonist is confused and asks what is suddenly happening there, not understanding anything. Libra then says the boy has finally appeared and that the dungeon he cleared had a lot of power. The head maid adds that they revived many more monsters than planned. Our hero is shocked to see everyone there, and Vince says everyone was curious about the human. A wolf monster says he never thought he'd be saved by a human and invites him for a drink. Alvina then starts pulling her master and says that would be a problem and that she'll go first. The young man shouts Liber's name as he's being dragged away and doesn't know what to do with the whole situation. With a glass of wine in hand, the Demon King just watches him with a smile and closed eyes. The monster then says that because of the choice he made, all those people were saved in the end. With a toast, he congratulates him and tells him to get used to receiving thanks from the monsters. But the protagonist states that he didn't do it for them and that it wasn't his real objective. With a focused look, the boy says that Alvina just reminded him of that girl from his past. With that, he turns and faces all the monsters with a determined and confident look. An image of Yuki, Saki, and the happy orphanage children at Christmas comes to our hero's mind. With a clenched fist, our protagonist seems determined with his decision to help everyone. But he opens his hand a little and seems to think better about the whole complicated situation. With a smile, he says that either way, he's happy they were saved in the end. Suddenly, a wolf monster asks if he is Vince's disciple, and Alvina is shocked by the question. Libra then teases Viento and says that for him to complain so much, he must really like the boy deep down. He adds that the butler even prepared special clothes for our hero to wear. Viento then retorts and says the same goes for his master, who also cares about the young man. Eating something, Libra says that at first, he thought they would use him, but the boy used them instead. He continues, saying the young man achieved results far beyond what they expected at the beginning. With a smile, the Demon King observes the boy from afar and calls him that guy in a serious tone. He then declares that the protagonist will be the key for them to one day rule the entire world. Back at the press conference, Saki asks for the question to be repeated, as she thinks she misheard it the first time. A mysterious hooded man then tells her to hand over the real hero, who cleared the dungeon. With a trembling eye, the girl hears the mysterious man ask for the true conqueror of the place. The man then says with a smile that she is hiding someone very dangerous for some reason. With a covetous look, he points and states that he will take that guy with him no matter what. Meanwhile, at an alley, the mysterious man attacks Gato, and a cell phone beeps on the dark ground. The screen shows a news story, and Gato shouts that he knows nothing about what happened in the dungeon. Being choked, the adventurer reveals that the boy he's looking for came with Lady Saki. The man then complains that he is a failure and that he is tired of so many weak adventurers. Frightened, the adventurer shouts that he remembers the name and reveals that the boy he's looking for is named Yuki. The man then looks at a photo of our hero on a board and says he understands that he is his target. Gato says he's not involved and asks to be let go, but the villain doesn't seem to agree. With a fiery aura, the mysterious man says no, because he would cause trouble if he talked to others. He then tells the adventurer to hate his own loose tongue and engulfs him in flames to silence him. The word Kal echoes as the fire consumes everything, and Gato's fate is sealed forever. Days later, we see our protagonist walking through a park with a bouquet of flowers in his hands. He thinks that somehow, being surrounded by humans feels like it hasn't happened in a long time. The boy decides to take a break from training and dungeon conquests and not think about monsters today. With a smile, he says that today is the day he will visit all his dear friends. With that, he arrives at a memorial for the Great Collapse, a dungeon tragedy from years ago. The place is dedicated to all those who lost their lives in that terrible and unprecedented disaster. He then remembers the people from the orphanage and thinks that many things to report have piled up. With a smile, the young man reflects on becoming an adventurer, clearing dungeons and training with a sword. With a focused look, the boy seems to be waiting for someone to arrive at that important location. Suddenly, he realizes someone is there and turns around, thinking it might be his friend Saki. But it was actually the mysterious hooded man who says he has been waiting for Yuki the whole time. With a smile, he introduces himself as Zapper, an A-rank adventurer, and says they are in the same line of work. Our hero asks if they haven't met before, and the man just says it's a pleasure. Zapper then reveals he came to recruit him, and the boy is shocked, saying he's still E-rank. Zapper then reveals he knows about the fake dungeon, leaving our protagonist completely shocked. With a serious look, he says the young man doesn't need to hide it because he was part of all that, right? Frightened, the boy wonders how the mysterious man knows such an important secret. In a flashback, Yuki begs Saki to say she was the one who won so he can rank up. Our hero then tries to deny it and says he only helped evacuate the other adventurers from the location. But Zapper doesn't believe him and states with a smile that it was the boy who defeated the dungeon boss. He continues, saying the White Flash destroyed the golem in just a few seconds with her power. With that, the man concludes that the young man has skills against A-rank bosses, and the boy thinks he knows too much. Zapper then asks him to listen and says he doesn't understand why he's hiding so much. He explains that clearing dungeons is not a normal job and having a bunch of weak pawns doesn't help much. The hooded man adds that to make real money you need strong weapons. With a confident smile, he states that you actually need the best kind of weapons possible. The protagonist then points to himself and asks if the mysterious adventurer means him. Zapper says that even with strong skills, there's a limit to clearing dungeons alone without help. But he explains that in a group, things are different and each reward might be smaller. In return, the man says the young man can go to many more places and get more rare items. With that, he approaches and invites our hero for them to make a lot of money together as partners. The boy then thanks him for thinking so highly of him, but seems to have another answer to give. With a smile, he says he'll have to refuse, as making money from dungeons is not his goal. The hooded man doesn't care about the refusal, and says that he's not very good with words anyway. He then says that he was going to try using force to recruit our hero anyway. With that, a red magic circle appears, and the man says it's time to use brute force. The protagonist is shocked by the mysterious man's action and tries to dodge the attack. Zapper then uses his Callfire Hammer ability and launches a fireball at the boy. The bouquet of flowers the young man was holding catches fire, and he quickly throws it to the ground. Our hero runs and wonders why on earth someone is using magic in the middle of the city. The villain praises his dodge and says he wants him even more for his adventurer group now. Yuki shouts for him to stop and says that this is a place where people rest in peace. The man agrees that using magic on the surface is illegal but doesn't seem to care about the rule. He says that refusing his offer is much worse and uses the Callstone Bend skill to trap him. Trapped by the chains, the boy shouts that he can't move and that he can't use his skills. Zapper says he is strong against monsters but has no experience fighting against other people. The villain then grabs the young man's face with his hand and the word, Kal, echoes once more. With his face covered in ice, our protagonist uses the Ice Bend technique to defend himself. The man says he is the opposite of him and that he was made for clearing dungeons, not for fighting. With a powerful punch, he says that's exactly why he wants him and attacks the young man with everything. Lying on the ground, the villain threatens him and says he will follow him into every dungeon and do the same. He adds that he calls himself the Skill Killer and that no adventurer can stop him. Our hero then curses the hooded man while being held tightly, unable to react. With a wicked smile, the villain says he will wait for a yes before he ends up departing for good. The burnt flowers on the park grounds symbolize the unexpected violence of that encounter. In Liber's dungeon, the Demon King moves a chess piece and says someone is trying to steal his pawn. With a serious look, he adds that the mysterious man's attitude was very rude to him. Our hero says the servant can buy some time, but he needs to come up with some kind of escape plan. Viento then asks why he didn't bring his sword, and the boy says it was his day off in the city. But the young man admits that even with the sword, he thinks he would still lose to Zapper in battle. Liber reminds him that he is a monster tamer and can use others to fight in his place. With that, he tells the boy to use the monsters who are good with magic to counterattack. Suddenly, an elf appears and asks if the Demon King called for her even though she was in the middle of research. The monster reveals that no one knows more about magic than her, and our hero is surprised. With a wicked smile, Liber tells the girl to study the Abyss, but she doesn't seem very willing. The elf then complains that he is Vince's disciple and that she doesn't like that grumpy old man. She adds that she has never seen him at tea parties or soirees like the other monsters in the dungeon. Annoyed, the girl shouts that she would never go to a party of that old-fashioned bat and that she is still young. She reveals that Kara Saw means around 1,000 years old and our hero is shocked. The elf says she is only 1,499 years old, and the boy thinks it's almost the same thing. With a clenched fist, the girl says that becoming Vince's strongest disciple will annoy him greatly. With that, she imagines herself in a forbidden romance with our hero, leaving the boy embarrassed. The young man then interrupts her and asks her to teach him how to use magic for his next battle. The elf agrees and says it sounds fun and that developing magic needs stimulation after all. In a giant library, the boy asks if all those books are about magic and is shocked. The elf says there are more and that almost her entire floor in the dungeon is composed of spell books. She calls him Disciple Number 1 and says that deep down, he doesn't understand what magic really is. With that, the girl asks the first question and wants to know the difference between magic and skills. Our hero then reflects on the question and tries to find a logical answer for it. The elf explains that skills are personal abilities, while magic is a universal ability. The young man is confused, and she says that skills can be divided into 3 different types. The first type are skills gained through a profession, like his demonic eye ability. The second type are skills inherent to each race, like the bat's vampirism ability. Lastly, there are skills that are born when a master technique is sublimated into something new. The elf explains that all of them depend on the individual abilities and talents of each person. With that, she says that even if they want to copy, some things are simply impossible to do. The girl then asks if the boy has experience with this, and he remains silent for a moment. With that, he remembers his own version of Viento's skill and how he adapted it for himself. Our hero then says he knows that very well and that magic must be the opposite of all that. The elf agrees and says that with the same magic power and incantation, the same result will be produced. She adds that magic is a universal and absolute law that governs their world. With a twinkle in her eyes, the girl extends her finger and says that that is true magic indeed. The young man gets excited about the explanation but suddenly remembers something important and stops. The elf then prepares for the second question and wants to know why there are people who don't use magic. The boy asks if the conditions are too strict, like consuming a lot of mana to use magic. The elf says the answer is simple, and that it's actually because using magic is very difficult. Our hero asks if it's about manipulating magical power, but the girl shakes her head no. She explains that true magic requires an incantation as long as an entire book to be used. The young man remembers Zapper's attack and the short incantation he used to summon it. With a book in hand, he says he has never seen anyone chant something so long in a battle. The girl then asks the third question and wants to know how he thinks they are chanting the spells. The protagonist thinks about the question for a bit with his hand on his chin, trying to find the right answer. With that, he answers that they must be using something else to assist with the incantation. The elf says the answer is correct and that there are tools like staffs to help with magic. She adds that they can also engrave magic circles to facilitate the process, or else chant in their heads, omitting certain parts, and our hero is amazed by the idea. The elf explains that the wonderful thing about magic is that the more you learn, the more you can cheat. With that, she demonstrates and uses the same technique as Zapper, the Call Fire Hammer, with ease. The girl explains that this is incantation emission, where you complete everything in your mind and launch. She says it's a fundamental skill, but the result depends on how well you understand the original. The elf asks if he repeats the text in his head as images or sounds and says it varies a lot. The young man then understands why differences appear, even if the incantation seems the same. With a smile, the girl says that once he understands this, he can forge his own invasion into it. With that, she summons several fire hammers at once, showing her mastery of magic. Our hero observes the fire hammers with a look of admiration and surprise at the elf's power. She explains that this way, he can leave just part of the original incantation and fill in the gap. With a book in hand, the boy says he finally understands what magic is and how it works. The girl then hands him a book and warns that if he just memorizes it, that's all he'll be able to use. She explains that an incantation is a command, and if he doesn't know what each phrase instructs, he can't evolve. The young man then complains that it's like learning a new language, and that he's already bad at English. The elf tells him to be grateful, as humans don't have as much time as she does to study magic. With that, she uses the skill Call Lev in the library, and a green magic circle appears on the floor. A drop of sweat runs down our hero's face, who seems nervous about what's going to happen. Suddenly, the boy is transported to a place in flames and wonders in fear where he is. The elf reveals that the spell simulates the content of a book and allows him to experience it in practice. She says that this is the world of her book, fire magic a slime can't understand. The young man then draws his sword to prepare for the challenge he will have to face now. With a confident smile, he says he is better at fighting than studying and gets ready for action. With a surprised look, the protagonist realizes the number of enemies he will have to face there. The elf says that for today, she will make him read all the main attributes and basic transformations of magic. Surrounded by two giant fire snakes, the boy asks if she wants him to clear all of that. The girl then challenges him with a smile and asks if he's not going to say it's impossible to do. A giant fire monster then appears and prepares to attack our hero with all its strength. But with a determined smile, the protagonist just answers no and prepares for battle. Facing an ice monster, our hero prepares to use his new battle abilities. The elf observes him with a smile and a twinkle in her eye, seeming to be having fun with the training. With a determined look and a smile on his lips, the boy says he will finish this in an instant. 3 days later on the same dungeon floor, our protagonist's intense training continues. A giant griffin lets out a terrifying screech and prepares to attack the young man with its sharp claws. The boy then begins to chant a spell to interfere with the giant monster's one attribute. With a cry, the winged creature charges forward with everything, but our hero is not intimidated and continues the spell. He continues the incantation and is thrown far away by the force of the wind the monster creates with its wings. With that, the young man manages to use the magic called air capture, and a green hand catches him in mid-air. The elf then teases him and says he really has no talent for magic and calls him Disciple 1. Lying on the ground, he says he now understands why adventurers don't chant spells in combat. The girl explains that magic was never meant for fighting, but for deceiving and rewriting the world. Even so, the boy thinks that all the spells he learned should be very powerful. With a wave of his hand, he prepares to test another of his new magical abilities. With that, the protagonist invokes the Call Stone Arrow and shoots at an imaginary target. But the arrow falls to the ground with no force at all, and the young man is completely shocked by the result. He shouts that this is ridiculous and that the chantless casting loses a lot of power in the process. The elf reminds him that shortcuts cause individual differences, and that incantations are commands to the world. She adds that he seems to be bad at compensating with images, which is why the magic is weak. With this, the boy concludes that if he adds an incantation to have power, he can't beat Zapper. The elf says that situations like him failing to break the wind with earth will continue to happen. She encourages him, saying he might be good at the next attribute, and throws him into the next challenge. The young man then runs and thinks that maybe he'll find an attribute he's good at, but there's still a problem. He wonders if Zapper even has a weak attribute that he can exploit in battle against him. Meanwhile, at a camp, Zapper and his group are gathered around a campfire at night. He is shocked to learn that Yuki is diving into an S-rank dungeon on his own. One of his men confirms it and says they couldn't find him and that he went to the infamous dungeon. The villain remembers that even an S-rank group with 2 men had to retreat from that place. With a smile, he says the boy is smart because that place really keeps average adventurers away. His companion asks what they should do, and the hooded man says they will enter the dungeon. The other adventurer protests, saying they still have monsters to subdue and that it's too dangerous. Zapper agrees it might be dangerous but seems to be enjoying the idea of a challenge. Suddenly, a giant worm monster emerges and attacks the group by surprise with a terrifying screech. The villain then easily defeats the creature with one of his powerful and effortless attacks. With a snap of his fingers, he uses the Cal magic and prepares to show his true power. Walking past the monster's bodies, he complains that he can't wait long for materials like that. One of his companions watches him shocked and says his incantation emission is incredible. Our hero thinks he can't react in time to Zapper's magic, which can always counterattack. Meanwhile, a worm monster attacks the villain's group, and one of them screams in fear at the attack. Zapper then uses several spells at once, showing his mastery over all elements. One of Zapper's companions watches him shocked and thinks that this is the power of an A-rank mage. Amidst the monster's bodies, the villain shows his power and prepares to go after his target. He says S-rank dungeons are dangerous and that they need to go quickly before the boy becomes untouchable. An adventurer calls him and says the collapse caused by the monsters left several injured behind. Zapper looks at the bodies and says they are just replaceable B-rankers and that they can restock. The companion shouts that he could save them, but the villain throws his cigarette away and asks if he really thinks so. He then stumps on the ground hard, showing his complete lack of empathy for the other adventurers. Our hero prepares to fight with a red aura of power surrounding his entire body. Zapper then says that if he's going to use his power, it will be to capture someone special, not just anyone. The elf watches the boy training and seems to be thinking about something with a bored expression. Lying on the ground, the young man seems exhausted, and the girl says he really has no talent for being special. Crying, our hero complains that he thought magic was universal and that he couldn't omit anything. She then says that if the main attributes are no good, the minor ones like insects are hopeless. The boy says he didn't expect to have so little talent and that they'll have to make do with what they have. Annoyed, the elf shouts for him not to act like he understands magic after just a little training. Our hero says no, but that really all the spells he tried to use were weak. The girl then gets angry and says his training hasn't even reached the first real stage yet. She explains that magic was made for everyone to rewrite the world and that it's a miracle against everything. With a serious look, the elf states that's why she won't tolerate words like giving up or yielding. The protagonist then asks what he should do to get stronger with magic. The elf reminds him that he did something similar against Viento and that the answer to his problem is simple. With a smile, she tells him to create a new magic that he can use and that is strong enough. The girl explains that his study of magic is more than enough and that he could even teach. Our hero then understands that if he's bad with existing magics, he should create a new one for himself. With a wink, the elf agrees with him and says that's exactly the answer he thought of. The young man then reflects on altering the world with just sensation and how that would be possible. The girl says that if it's magic for combat, a practical format is best, and the boy asks what that was. Suddenly, her eyes glow and she uses the call magic to feel something strange. With that, the water vision is activated, and she can see what is happening elsewhere. On one of the dungeon floors, Zapper uses his fire wave to search for our protagonist. With a smile, he wonders where the boy is and uses his water droplets to find him. The villain then shouts Yuki's name and uses the wind search to finally find his target. Our hero is shocked to see the man in the vision and asks why on earth he is there in the dungeon. The elf says it seems he followed the boy and that this is perfect for their training. A vision of a group of adventurers in a magic circle appears, and the protagonist remembers something. With a shocked look, he shouts that this is like that time, and prepares for what's next. Suddenly, he is teleported and thinks that, as he imagined, this was a teleportation magic. The young man then realizes he is on a floor he doesn't know, and the villain also appears, surprised. The elf then tells him to handle the situation using magic and not summoning as usual. She explains that the opposite of activating magic with an incantation is affecting mana with just sensation. Zapper says that, as he thought, the boy was actually hiding his power the whole time. With a smile, the villain then asks what his answer is to his recruitment proposal. Our hero gets nervous and prepares to answer but is interrupted by a surprise attack. Suddenly, the hooded man uses his icebreaker dart, magic to attack the young man with everything. The protagonist manages to narrowly dodge the blow and prepares to counterattack with his sword. The villain says he doesn't need an answer, and he can see the decision in his rebellious eyes. With that, the boy uses the Callstone Shell, magic to protect himself from the enemy's next attacks. He then charges forward with his sword amidst several ice darts that fly toward him with speed. Zapper then praises him, saying he has the aptitude of a swordsman and is not fazed by his magic. Suddenly, a puddle of mud appears on the ground and seems to be moving toward our hero. The call mud bend magic then traps the young man's legs, who is shocked and unable to move.